I need to turn my mic on.
No, it's on.
Oh, is it on?
Yeah.
Oh, has it got me screaming?
No.
Oh,
We should have done it though. Really should have
Jeez,
done
I'm still late.
it. Welcome to our episode 2 of Sitting with Rob. You're supposed to say Alan.
Oh, Alan.
Do you know like they do on that like this morning shows and stuff?
I'm still shocked because before we started this, we've just sat for a bit, haven't we? And you screamed.
I didn't scream.
It was really
using,
loud,
I was
Alan.
using the internal
It was
bell.
really loud. So I'm still reacting.
And I've got a cough.
You've got it this time. So yeah, I'm still reacting in a good way.
Yeah.
You've shook the shit out of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder what that would look like, shaking the shit out of someone.
Well, I don't want to imagine.
Yeah.
So I need to ground and settle a little bit more.
Yeah, we do,
I'll be
don't
good,
we?
I'll be good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we will be. Where do we start with reactivity?
Where do we start? I think to mention the bits how it's normal, it's ordinary. You know, so my reaction to what you've just done in a fun way,
Yeah.
and then when it gets where it's more unhelpful, perhaps maybe looking at that and how we can help people. I don't know, by listening to this and some ideas, but where it just gets in the way, I think from my experience, where you've got reactivity and then your response isn't quite helpful. It's unskillful or not wise, as they would say in mindfulness. I don't know, where would you like to start?
I suppose like there's so many different angles, isn't there?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the story of the 12 blind man and the elephant?
No.
So the 12 blind man and the elephant is elephant's in the middle, 12 blind men all around the elephant, and they have to guess what the elephant is because they don't know what the elephant is. So they only have a certain designated space for themselves, and then they make sense of what, oh, this is a rough wall. The one that's on the tail, oh, this is a rope, or you know, however inclined your mind is, you might think of it as something else. Trunk, oh, this is a branch or a tree. And then they all come together, and then through all their feelings and senses and sense making in the mind of that type of stuff, then they will come together and analyse and go, what was it? That's what we're going to do.
Oh, so we're like touching elephants?
So if you think of reactive, do you want to? Should we just touch elephants?
Touch an elephant? So figure it out, touch the parts.
Have you ever touched an elephant?
I think I've imagined, you know, when you have that false memory thing. In my memory, I think I have, but I know I haven't.
Yeah.
And that would be good for reactivity as well, bringing that in. Do you know where? Because my daughters sometimes say, well, that didn't actually happen. And I went, it did, and I was outraged in the supermarket as that person said this. And they went, that's not what happened. So how we can get clouded, I think, would be useful.
Yeah. It's weird though, isn't it? How we, like, if you think of a situation that happened and then your recollection of the event, if you're in reactive state of how that shapes the memory, rather than, because no memories are fully absolute true, are they?
No, absolutely not.
So you think if you think from the perspective of if you're in a reactive state, how's that going to shape your memory recall of an event?
Have you heard the memory recall thing? I'd only just discovered it recently in EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, that we both do, where every time you look at a memory, it completely changes the memory itself, the view, the perspective. So that's really interesting.
It is. Yeah. Should we start? Let's start with that EMDR.
Yeah.
Because I suppose, you know, we know what we're talking about, but for listeners, because you think from a reactivity perspective, trauma memories are reactive. They're reacting to the present moment. Course, these recordings of memories are reacting to, the body's reacting to the recordings.
Yeah.
Where would we start with, like, if we were to explain it briefly to listeners of what EMDR does to reactivity?
I think for when I'm working with it, you know, it's trapped in your body, isn't it? In the senses, in your thoughts, what you presumed at the time might have happened or was happening. You know, your belief system, what you were presuming, the emotion. So I think what it does, it's when that resurfaces in, however, could be all of those things that I've just mentioned, or one of them, that it helps you clear it up. It's like good housekeeping, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think for some of our listeners, what I was conscious of is that we're not going too much into the realms with this work, what we're doing today, this talk. It's for smaller irritants, isn't it? So just to take the edge off. So if we're reacting to things that are probably more easier to manage and process rather than their extreme of things, because I don't know.
Yeah, the extremities of trauma. Yeah. Rather than reactivity to someone cutting you up in traffic.
Yeah. So light, I think they mention it a lot in mindfulness, that 2 kilogram weight. It's just enough to hold for your ego to not get overly defended.
Yeah.
So yesterday I was thinking of this podcast, and I was driving to the gym, and I was like looking at all my reactions getting out of the road, and 40 mile an hour, and I was 1 mile over. I was like, right, better just knock it back down. It's busy. And then when other people were going fast and then slow, then there was this person dawdling on the interchange, then got the gym and all the reactions there, this constant entourage of like reacting in the supermarket, and someone's dithering and going dead slow. And then I was like, I let a person in, so my reaction to let this person, I was like, nice reaction. But then someone else wanted to be let in because he had a loaf of bread, and I was like, then they opened another till, then they wanted to come back. And the lass was just laughing on the till. She said, aren't people funny? Very profound. And I was like, they actually are. And she said, a person come in the other day and bought a clothes area. And she said, and their reaction, because they couldn't carry out the shop, they bought a skateboard and attached it to a skateboard. And she's just howling at the reaction she's seeing live every day of how we're trying to navigate.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, that's a brilliant idea, but I didn't really want to tell her because I didn't need an explanation. But I think it's those things, isn't it? The comedy in things when we're caught up, that might be helpful to the listeners in this session. The small R reactivity rather than the reactivity that's going to like send you over the edge, and you know.
Yeah. I suppose like when you think about the amount of stuff that we react to, it's probably infinite, isn't it? It's you go through life, even you're reacting to the ground as you're walking on it, like each step. Like your feet are reacting to, if you were barefoot. Imagine if you were barefoot on rocks. Look at the amount of reactivity that's happening. That's good reactivity, isn't it? Like if your feet are walking on a beach with all sorts of different pebbles and stuff, then you're going to be adjusting your balance and adjusting your pressure of your feet, which is reactivity, but in a really good balanced way. Like,
unless you're me, so I took my granddaughter and daughter last Monday to Saltburn, and that pisses me off, you know, when you're on the pebbles, and I'm like, because I prefer to be on like, and I'm like, get off this beach, and I'm like, come on, this is it, today out, it's meant to be
is
nice.
Is that your like your feet? If you were to just think about your feet,
they don't care, do they?
They're just reacting. Aren't they? They're reacting. This is just where your mind's not on the same wavelength as your feet. Your feet are like, oh, this is good. This is lovely. It's a bit of a different terrain that we're on. Where your mind's like, for fuck's sake, what have you brought us on here for? We like the flat ground. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
You think like there's so many different levels of reactivity in the body, but also in the mind, that now imagine if you went on that same beach barefoot, knowing that your feet just do their own thing, and then you align your mental reactivity to the body reactivity of the feet, what would be different?
Well, in my case, the same, because it would still piss me off. So your analogy is wonderful for a mainstream.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
For a mainstream person, but it would still, it does something. So
is it your feet then?
I don't know what it is. It's just I can't abide like being on uneven ground. It does something to my mind. My mind's got a different response. I know we've mentioned like bits of ADHD and neurodiverse stuff. Something I was watching the other day is that people who perhaps are more neurodiverse might have more synapses. So things that fire, the neurons firing together and information. and they have less pruning of them synapses. So synaptic pruning is happening less. So there's more information to go through. So my feet are like, in my opinion, others might feel the same. They're listening to this, there might be a reaction about certain things, and that it's been okay with her, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm reacting,
Yeah,
and I know that in that moment I have to just be kinder to myself, because I don't want to fight and fall out with my daughter over rocks and be tentative. And my granddaughter was having the time of her life throwing rocks, and then she's reacting by jumping in a pool and it's freezing cold, but she was living her best life. So it's all of those. It's very personal, isn't it? These responses.
They're very fast, aren't they? Reactivity is. I always like the opposite of reactivity is receptiveness or responsivity. Is that even a word, responsivity? Because if it's not,
it is now.
It is. It's a neologism. I've just made it up.
Yeah.
Do you know who made the word neologism up?
No.
Roald Dahl.
No.
Because he's the king of neologistic words, isn't he? He just makes up words in his.
Yeah.
I'm going off on a tangent there.
That's a nice tangent, because it's bringing me the reactivity that I'm getting is my eldest daughter loves the books. So I'm getting a nice reaction.
Yeah.
Because of course it's all about me, isn't it, now?
But I suppose, like, if you think of the polarities of reactivity and receptivity, one's super fast, one's super slow. Because if you respond to something, it's, oh, hello there. It's like if we were to, let's go into receptive mode, then everything slows down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And even your noddings going slower. If you go into if you go into reactive mode, then the body is, now we're laughing, the body goes into more of a fast mode, doesn't it? So it's interesting how you can, I suppose, go from how would you move from reactivity, if it's an unhealthy reactivity, into a healthy, either a healthy reaction or a calmer response?
But so before we answer that, the first thing I'd go back to as well, even with the healthy reactions, some people are averse to that. So when you look at like aversion, that pushing away, as we discussed in mindfulness, with depression, often people are averse to pleasant things, so they push that away. The mind's looking, it's ruminating, it's going over the same thing. With OCD, there's an aversion to, oh, I was happy there, or something bad might happen. So even in both realms, as you go into helpful reaction, it's not, some people will have a response. And if you go on the other way as well, but I think it's, you don't know you're in it. I know I've mentioned this in the last one, till you're in it, till you're feeling it. And it's not, and sometimes it's when other people are telling you, like, oh, calm down then, or you need to take a moment.
Really, the reaction of someone telling you to calm down.
Does it work when someone tells you to calm down if you're being reactive?
Oh, no.
It's never, that's what we're trained, isn't it, to say to people. Never tell a reactive person, even though I do say it outside of my work, to calm down, because it just causes the absolute
What I've
opposite.
always noticed, personally and professionally, if someone's been hyper reactive, whether they're fuming about something or angry about something, is, and this has took me years, and my daughters have, teenage daughters teach you a lot, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I would, I'm going into a father role now, but if my children are reacting or kicking off or tantruming at any age, then what I've found is that if I go into fix mode, if I try to fix the reaction, then it never worked. Where if I go into present validation of the person who's been reactive, it weirdly brings them into either a healthy reaction or switches them to response mode. As in, that's like, if someone's, I'll give you an example. If one of my daughters was upset, blokes, we want to fix shit, don't we?
We're overtrained to fix, aren't we?
So if I was to go into that and try and work through the solutions, then usually my daughters would kick off even more. As in, and now that they're in their later teens, they now say, I don't want a solution. I just want you to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's taught me to not react through solution-focused stuff. As a bloke, we tend to do that, don't we? Where if you think sometimes moving from unhealthy reactions might not even be unhealthy. It might be just a valid reaction to a scenario.
Of course, justified, yeah.
Is if there's another person there, is just to listen. It's that simple, isn't it? And that is the solution.
So how do we take our listeners to listen to their own experience without getting like overly wordy or too deep?
Yeah,
so in a very practical way, from what you've just said, because that's a lovely analogy. So that when people are listening to they're not really in tune, because sometimes I'm not, and lots of my clients or family members aren't. You're not always like resonating with what's going on.
No.
What would you say is the first stage to? You've got that fancy term reactivity, haven't you? It just means you're responding to your environment, your thoughts, your inner thoughts, whatever's going on. And what would you suggest to be able to listen to it?
Well, I suppose it's from one angle. It would be who's there with you.
Yeah. Because
I suppose if the other person's in a reactive state, you see this all the time, don't you, in families and stuff, where if you've got a very calm person who's in and the body's calm and the other person's reacting, if the other person remains calm and either validates or just is there, then the other person's body will start to calm down. So you could see it from that perspective, as in body to body co-regulation, like the external part, as in just body reactivity, not mental reactivity, is how having two reactive people in a room will just spur that on even more.
Yeah.
Where if you have the person who's more calm, their body, from a co-regulation perspective, and if people don't know what co-regulation is, we're a co-regulation species where our hearts and our nervous systems regulate one another. So that it's called neuroreception, where basically your nervous system has a scanning device and it regulates each person's hearts and heartbeats and heart rate variability and all that. Big fancy words, but long story short, we're in this room together, we're feeling quite calm, so my heart and your heart will be co-regulating. It will probably be in a coherent state with both, because we're in a nice calm environment and we're relatively calm people.
Yeah.
Where if you imagine one nervous system being hyper wired and the other person's calm, then it will have an effect on their nervous systems. So that's just from that's just from the external body perspective, isn't it?
I wonder if the window of tolerance, if people haven't heard of it, or if you have, it's like a little revision of it, isn't it? Because that fits in perfectly with that Dan Segal's model. And he's a brilliant heady person, isn't he? I don't know what's his job. He's a mindfulness teacher, but he does.
Is he brain?
Yeah, he does like neuroscience.
He's very neurobiology stuff, doesn't he?
So the middle of the window, where I'm probably at right now, when I'm guessing you are, where you've got the most give, the top where you're hyper aroused and it's hot emotions and you're frantic, and it can be very addictive for lots of people. So that's anger, you're shouting, you're screaming, or you're responding, your amygdala, your threat center's gone off, isn't it? You're in fight or flight mode. And then the bottom of the window where you're hyper, you're numbed out, you're cold, it's probably more low mood. Not always, but so I think for our listeners, how do we help people with everything you've said, that body to body stuff, their own bodies, their own minds? What has helped you and others through mindfulness keep extending this window? So if I'm at my window tolerance, I'm like, shut up, Alan, I don't want to meditate or I don't want to do any of this stuff, and I don't want to listen to I'm reacting to reactivity. what helps you and others widen their window. So you have got that option point, isn't it? There's choice points in it, even if the minute, to constantly keep building that and building that. What have you done? How would you help others widen their window?
As you know, I'm quite profound in my thinking. So I personally don't think that there's one key to unlock everyone's doors of reactivity.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just the internal world. I think we have to acknowledge the culture that we're in.
So you're being, sorry to interrupt, your profoundness settles me. Because while you're talking, it widens my window. I can stop having to try and fix it and sort when I'm having other conversations that are separate to this. And I can just sit and be, and it settles and settles. For others, they might not feel like they don't need to. I think that's got a place, hasn't it? For some people, it might be listening to more philosophical things, classical music extends your mind. Not that I listen to that all the time. But then I'm wondering what you are very practical as well. You've just chilled me out in the, you went, oh, shall we settle then? Which would have been brilliant to record, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
What is it from? What did you feel then? What did you notice in our environment for you to do that? But we didn't do last time.
Probably thinking practical perspective, the here and now perspective is the containing a scenario. Like we had this conversation last week of if there's the complexities of reactivity, i.e. your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, how then your body's reacting to the internal world. You know, if your body's wired or if it's just anxious and it's hot or it's cold, but then how that interplays with who are you with that's making you reactive, but then what society are you in that's exacerbating the reactivity, as in social media, you know, thrives on reactivity. So where do you take it from? So, but going back to the practical side, it's like honing in on something that can be done in that moment for that person would be, and then you can have a more deep and meaningful conversation after their reactivity's either gone into a healthy zone or calmed down. Would be, personally, I would either work in the internal world, thoughts and feelings, or the external world of the individual, as in, right, what's your body doing right now? Because, you know, in mindfulness, the good old puppy training analogy always springs to mind for me. Is if no one knows this analogy, it's, you know, if you get a new pup, if we had a puppy in here right now who's 8 weeks old, what would it be doing? It would be running around, it would be tugging on your laces, it would be shitting and pissing, it would be excitable, wouldn't it? It would be all over the place. And then me and you would train it, and we'd train it to sit. And then 6 months down the line, doing one of these with a dog in the room, it would be happily sat in the corner. So I suppose if you think of the individual's reactivity, then you're working on the internal thoughts and feelings simultaneously with the body. As in, what's the body doing right now? So I would contain it firstly to the body. As in, if someone's body is like this, then you'd work on that part of the body, as in, what does that part of the body want to do right now? As in, and usually people say, I want to stand up or I want to run.
So do that.
So honor that part of the body that's feeling that it wants to do something. And then you're tracking, aren't you? You're tracking the body's responses to reactivity moment by moment. And once that comes out of the leg, that reactivity, then they might settle for a little while, but then they might do that with the hand. Let's move that awareness now to your hand. What does your hand want to do? It wants to wave, or it wants to punch something. And sometimes if you know, if I'm working with people who are anxious or reactive for whatever reason, then I have boxing gloves and boxing pads.
Oh, wow.
So if their hands are wanting to be reactive or even kind of clenched fists, then there's something being held in there, isn't there? What's your fists holding? Does that need to be released? And sometimes kind of punching a punch bag.
Or made worse, as we sometimes do.
Yeah.
In progressive muscle relaxation in CBT, you'd make it worse. So to summarise, not that I want to back, and I'm feeling I'm backing you into a corner with questions. Like I'm sitting here just nodding like I'm on.
Yes.
Question
because
time
you're being the responsive.
And I'm like, it's just making me chuckle. And then there's nothing wrong with profound, is there either?
No.
Wherever we want to land or wherever we want to talk about, it's our choice. I think to be very practical, the first thing is to recognise, isn't it? You can't recognise reactivity sometimes. You just can't. So then it's, do I want to be skillful? I'm always asking myself and others, and they might be like, well, actually, no. I want to continue like fuming and slamming pots about. Well, I continue, that's going to make you feel shit. And your mood's going to dip eventually. Because you get that surge into the window of tolerance to hyperarousal. You're going to get an adrenaline surge, which sometimes feels lovely. I had one the other day at the dentist. I'll have to tell you, it's another story. It was brilliant. Just really gorgeous feeling. So that's addictive because we're hyper skillful. Words are going to drop out of our mouths. We're going to say the truths that we're in your window. You probably go, that's not the best thing to say. So it's noticing, isn't it, in that place, actually, do I want to be here? And lots of the time, hyper-aroused people don't. So there's that body-to-body connection, our own body. Do you know that top-down, bottom-up approach in the brain? So you've mentioned the top-down. That's sort of your thoughts, isn't it? What's going on in your head. It's more intellectual. Sometimes that's gone offline when we're hyper-aroused. You just can't get access to it. So dropping in is going to give you that space to do that. The bottom-up approach is what meditation and mindfulness and dance and swimming and sports, they come up under the brainstem, and it's not as crude or as basic as that till you come to this place. But I find a lot of people that they don't always like the options of what that gives. So then we have to be less sarcastic, or we actually have to, there's a solution to something, and we're like, but if I'm up there and there, I don't have to face some of there's an avoidance sometimes. And in avoidance, we can either approach or retreat something. So a lot of the time we're retreating from what actually needs to be looked at and explored, because it's painful sometimes, or boring, or wherever is happening. So you've got those responses. What about, I'm often finding that a lot of people don't always go up there, or if they have been up there, the adrenaline fatigue kicks in. And by that I mean you're just absolutely exhausted and you're numbed out, or you've gone to that place because you feel like whatever you're trying to do is futile, it's dangerous. That's often in depression. What might you help people with? And again, I'm putting you on the spot again.
I'm reacting. I'm feeling reactive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening, Alan?
What
are you noticing?
I'm noticing that, like, and this is my internal stuff, so we'll bring it in anyway, is you're asking me questions, and then there's a reaction in me going, oh, what if I don't know the answer of what he's about to ask?
And then can you feel your window? Like,
I can feel it.
Is it fully closed? Is it fully
closed? No, it's not fully closed, because obviously this is safe.
Yeah.
But I can feel my mind, my neocortex, going to sleep.
Wow. So your higher centre, your top down approach, that's now closing.
To go.
Even in this talk.
Yeah.
And mine's wide open, isn't it? Because I'm going, you can answer all the questions today. Because I don't know, I'm like, I haven't got any headspace. I'll come back to it.
So we're in a reactive situation right now, aren't we? Where, as you ask questions, and this will probably play out for a lot of people, and if we might as well use this,
of course,
live, because as you're asking questions, and because we're recording it, if this was not recorded, and there is a level of
cut to the chase, what's wrong with not knowing something?
Nothing. It's
logically up here in your top-down approach. Nothing. What's your body telling you about? Without going too deep, because I don't want to.
I'm happy to go anywhere.
Psychoanalyze the shit out.
But I suppose
I know nothing. Imagine at the end of this, you play it back and you're doing your editing, and it's just like, oh, it doesn't know anything. What does your body feel in that?
It feels insignificant.
Ooh. How does that? So that's a thought. How does that feel in your body? to feel insignificant. And you can have a go on me in a minute because it feels like I'm digging at you.
It feels shrinking.
Oh, shrinky. What's the opposite to shrinky?
Expansive.
So how would you get expanded in this space through mindfulness? And let's do a 3-minute breathing space.
Yeah.
So it's not to, in meditation, in mindfulness, this isn't to solve or to fix. It's just to be with what's here. So then we can restore the balance so it doesn't feel like you're entering into a psychotherapy session because it's not helpful. Yeah. So just feeling your feet on the floor. And our listeners, obviously, if you're driving, don't do this while you're driving.
Or you could if you wanted to. There'd be lots of reactions after.
Jeez.
Don't though.
No, absolutely don't.
Don't.
So wherever your head's at right now, if you've chosen to do this 3-stage breathing space, this mini meditation, just finding a seat, a spot. If you laid on the bed or you're listening to this walking around, you might want to sit down for a moment. If your feet meet the ground, allowing the ground to come up to meet the soles of the feet. Sensing the sitting bones, so you may be on a chair, a stool, a cushion, you may be lied on the floor or a sofa. Just noticing the body in contact. Sensing how the spine is right now, the uplift of the spine, the shoulders. Gently bringing the focus of attention to the head if you choose. You may wish to tuck the chin under ever so slightly. If you decide, you may wish to come to the breath and take a few deeper breaths in without forcing the breath into the body. Gently letting the breath turn and flow out with ease. And then subtly turn and flow back in. And let the breath gently turn and flow back out. The first stage of the breathing space is to simply acknowledge what's around right now. So move into the landscape of thought, of thinking. Perhaps thoughts about what you've got to do next, thoughts about what's going on in the environment, just simply noticing thoughts as just mental events in the mind. And if it's possible, gently letting go of thinking now and move into the emotional tone of the body. Happy, sad, bored, irritated, not trying to push anything away, but simply resting with what's here right now. And then the second stage, if you decide, is really bringing the focus of attention close to breathing itself. So not trying to breathe in any unique or special way, simply allowing the breath to come into the body, calmly turn and flow back out. Gently turn and flow back in, letting the breath breathe itself. If you notice the mind's gone off to thinking, This is meditation. Meditation is to simply notice, pause, and the options to unhook from experience and come back to the felt sense of the body breathing in this moment. And then stage 3 is to still be with the breath, but expand the experience into the body itself, the space the body takes up, the weight of the body pressed down into the surface it's being held by. And then moving awareness into the room around the body and the gap between those places, the envelope of the skin, holding all of that in awareness. And as the practice slowly comes to an end, there's an option now to bring this more open, spacious-like quality into the next moment of the day. Thank you.
That was nice. But there was some reactivity right at the end. Do you know where it was?
Oh, what was that?
It was, did I press record on the phone?
Ah.
And I am going to have to check.
You do what you do, you boo.
Because otherwise we'll get through the entire show without even realising. Just going to check. Yeah.
Oh, we're recording.
It's on. It's recording.
Oh, brilliant.
That's it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we've just lost 36 minutes of a very rich, honest, open, expansive, reactive, receptive conversation.
So what I've noticed in that, there's been some judgment about you being profound sometimes. That's needed. It's a beautiful quality to sit with. And I could sit with it for hours and hours and hours. It settles, super settles me to the point where I get all wangy. And I'm just like, oh, and it's lovely to sit in. But then I also know that it might not be helpful for you sometimes. It's not for me to sit in judgment with. It's time for you to spin the tables on me, Alan, now, because what I've noticed, like, what do you think? And what I'm like, I do it a lot, you know, when you haven't got the answers, or you're in a supervision session for one of the, you know, when you're in that phenomenon, you're like, I don't know where I'm going to go with this, and you go, what do you think? And you till you get some catch up with it.
I suppose before I turn the tables, just for listeners of how it felt for me to, particularly having a quick breathing space, but also the openness of, oh, what are we both feeling here? I'm reacting, I'm feeling what's happening in my body. My body's shrinking, my neocortex is switching off. I'm feeling like I've been questioned and interrogated, which isn't the logical brain thinking that. It's the body's responses to probably something in the past as a child.
Yeah, of course.
Now, as soon as we acknowledge that on a subtler level, that's what was going on. The neocortex, if I'm going to speak from a very scientific perspective, started to light back up. Because we acknowledged something in the room that was an elephant. It was the good old elephant in the room scenario. And I think we both tuned into that very quick and acknowledged that that was happening, which is a skillful, without blowing our own trumpets up our own asses, is a skillful demonstration of how to have an open dialogue about difficult experiences.
Yeah.
Because that, you know as well as I do, that wouldn't happen usually in normal day-to-day conversations. The unspoken words or the unspoken reactions, physical, emotional, or thinking, would be left unsaid. And then someone goes away and creates a story in their own. Did you see the way he was looking at me in that room? Yeah. Asking me all them questions. That would
you
go
sound
on.
like me. I can't believe it.
So even the mindfulness practice, the openness, the acknowledgement of how we were both feeling intuitively, allowed all parts of the body to come back online. The shrinking didn't happen. The expansiveness went back up to, You know, as in, I felt that there was a shrinking down into the senses in the body, as in, oh, I'm just feeling as though I'm shrinking now. And then I couldn't think, where as soon as you acknowledge that, right back up into the top complex systems, the thinking system and stuff. And then things came back online, all from intuitive acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, to acknowledge what we've just demonstrated over the last 15 minutes of being with reactivity from a receptive, it's the dance, isn't it then? It's the dance of being with, acknowledging reactivity, and then what can hold it? Well, it was honesty, openness, and receptiveness to hold the right. Let's hold you and let's just see what's going on, and the mindfulness added to that process.
Yeah.
So just to, I suppose, to help people formulate what just happened is that.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to switch the.
How are you going to do that?
I don't know how to do it now. It's like,
Gosh, is it?
I suppose, like,
because I noticed before all of that, in all of those lovely words in your synopsis, there was starting to be a subtle shift of power imbalance. Me being the questioner.
Yeah.
And isn't there that response? We do it a lot in mindfulness, as you're doing your 50-50 attention, it's called. So 50 attention to your own body, being aware of what you're saying, hearing the listener, you know, constantly shifting where your attention and focus is. And then as you're saying words, you tend to lose focus of your own body, don't you? As you're saying and talking and the 50-50 attention. And it's not always like black and white 50-50. So while I'm listening, I'm like nearly in 75% attention. And so that, what do you call it? The
neocortex.
Or I just call it the Wi-Fi's gone off. Because I work with a lot of young people.
I don't usually call it neocortex.
I like it. I'm going to try and use some of that fancy term.
I think I heard it the other day.
Nice.
And
Neocortex.
I've heard it before, but like never really used it. I thought, it's a fancy term to use in here.
Yeah. Before you spin the tables, it reminds me of the model I use a lot, the triune brain. So your neocortex, the higher centre of thinking, Wi-Fi goes off, doesn't it? So the next stage of the brain, again, I know it's not in these very crude layers, is the mammalian brain. They used to call it like the cat and cow. Yeah. So the mammalian is like your emotional centre. So sometimes it's okay, you're calm, a lot of my clients or people I work with, I'm numbed out, I'm numb, I just feel numb, which is still a feeling. And then the reptilian brain, fight, flight, food. What is it? Fight, flight, freeze, food and fuck.
And fawn.
Oh, and fawn. Oh, are you like flop?
Well, it's as in Stockholm syndrome.
Ah, fawn.
As in the whole, if you can't use any of them others, then you're going to have to befriend.
Oh, of course, yeah, fawn. I need to look more into them. So there's those in your reptilian brain. So sometimes for younger people, I would say your cat and cow brain. So the triggers come in and we're constantly bombarded from the reptilian brain, from when we were little reptiles, to respond, to scatter all of too hot, getting out the shade and need water, move. And then the mammalian brain, our emotional centers, that's how we all communicate, isn't it? Everything that we do in our therapies is to acknowledge that emotions are there, what they're trying to communicate. And often when you're in that window of tolerance and you've hyper-aroused or under-aroused, thinking switched off. So you're reacting like a cat or a cow, or mammalian reptilian. So I was in my higher place, wasn't I, firing all this stuff off at you. But I'm just sat smiling like, I know lots of stuff about...
Look at me and my power.
So we spin it, come on.
I suppose the interest would be is what's on a deeper level, not obviously this is clearly not therapy whatsoever, but from a reactive perspective, what was your reaction to go to the higher, to questioning from a power balance perspective?
Just because I'm intrigued in what you do and how you do things, and so it's looking at that, isn't it? How even that with people sometimes can then make them react. So we can over question, can't we? So sometimes I'm thinking in a session, I should be doing deep psychodynamic stuff that I'm not radically trained in. That can then overwhelm the client. So it's this space, isn't it? That I wouldn't always formally do a 3-stage breathing space. I'd probably do one after a session. But it might be acknowledging, noticing. So as we model and say to a client, what's happening now? Is my questioning getting on your nerves? Or some of they absolutely in that place where they're enthralled by it and go very deep, and they're non-linear thinkers. And by that I mean they're not on a straight line from yes to no. So that there being their element with that. Introverts don't always like a lot of questioning, or sometimes we don't do it. If you pointed out, you know, if you're that guy in a lecture and you get asked a lot of stuff, sometimes it can take you out of your thinking place. So I guess it's just I'm incredibly professionally nosy.
Right.
So I'm as I noticed your reaction, we did that. It was to almost model to the listener. He's a skill that you can use.
Yeah.
But then we're not using it as avoidance. You can see some people go, I better just meditate then, because you know, I don't like what you've said to me. You've annoyed me, so I'm just going to shut you out. It's not that, is it? That it's done separately to the space sometimes, or on your own in private. I don't know where I'm going.
I suppose, like, going off on another tangent is how moving mindfulness to receptiveness can sometimes be bypassing. As in, we can use mindfulness as in, right, I'm not going to acknowledge these feelings, so I'm going to go straight to the higher modes of mindfulness and meditation. And then we enter into bypassing, and we never really acknowledge what we're actually trying to bypass. There's just some sort of difficult sensation, emotion, or thought. And if we don't sit with it, as we did right then, we sat through it all. If you don't do that, then you get sometimes you'll bypass to something else. It doesn't have to be mindfulness, it can be drugs. Bypassing is happening constantly, isn't it? Is where, you know, someone, I'll give you my example from years ago before I started mindfulness. And the kids were young, they were 1 and 3. And my mum was dying at the time, and work was very stressful. So lots of stresses from different perspectives in my life. Bearing in mind, I wasn't as calm as I am these days. I was looked calm on the surface, but underneath, the good old duck under the water scenario. So my external presentation was this, but internally I was screaming. And came home, picked the kids up, came home one night, and kids are screaming around my ankles. Wife's still at work. Got to feed 2 kids. I've got all of this stuff from work going around my mind. So very much the mind's full of thoughts and feelings. The body's full of sensations from that. And then went straight, bypassed, rather than went straight from feeling very, very stressed with 2 crying toddlers who just wanted the tea, just wanted feeding, to, nope, can't deal with this. And then got a mug out the cupboard. This is what led me to mindfulness. This is the event that led to mindfulness. Got a mug out the cupboard, went into another cupboard and got a bottle of vodka, poured the entire mug full of vodka, and then proceeded to drink it. Halfway through necking a mug of vodka, something came online and went, what the fuck are you doing? Which was, in hindsight and on reflection, something which came online as an awareness, came online and started to manage the situation. You need to do something about this. So on reflection now, years later, that reactivity led to something greater, because there was something else that came in to speak to reactivity. As in, I put the mug of vodka down, calmed myself down, and then that was the event that led almost the tip of the iceberg scenario that led to my journey of going on the mindfulness meditation, where I'm at right now in life. That was kind of one of the key moments of reactivity.
What I'm hearing is that place, if you're religious, it would be God. If you're meditate for me, it's like my higher self, or
Mm.
just the all-knowing, without getting too woo-woo about it. So that place in EMDR, it's called your caretaker, that looks
Yeah.
over the whole system and goes, don't do this, do that. And it reminds me, there's an author called Hilary Jacobs Handel who does the change triangle. She's adapted it from something else and then made it her own. So we've got defences on one part of the triangle. So you're being understandably. And then in the session, there's a little diddy defence, isn't there? There's meant to be. And then in therapy, we would sit with that defence more, or be with it, to not shame, to understand. Mindfulness, we can take a different approach. And then on the other side of the triangle, there's guilt, anxiety and shame. And the core of our emotions, so I don't know, panic, fear, love, joy, sexual excitement, anger, sit right at the core. So the mindfulness practices get right to the core, get us to feel as you're describing there, and you build and build and build. And she describes these 7 C's. So there's calm, curious, content. So I'm being super curious in this session and asking tons of questions. So for me, that method, if people need something else, it's trying to find another skill that might superimpose what you're already doing, to keep coming back to that place of these 7 C's of just experience. And then we're back out and we defended, or we're feeling anxiety, guilt and shame. And I'm conscious of the time, and I know we're moving like more towards the end. And it might be really helpful to have like a little gift to take away, so that when people are listening back, even if they just need the last 10 minutes, of what's been really useful. So we've mentioned reactivity. You've given some wonderful examples. You've been like reactive live, understandably, because I'm sat in my place and blah, blah, asking tons of questions.
Yeah.
Then how mindfulness can just be more reflective on the experience, not trying to alter and change, but sometimes we want to feel a little bit differently, don't we? Talked about the window of tolerance, the change triangle, the neocortex, I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi going off. So what would be a grab if someone was running past this door now 100 miles an hour and you're going, do these things, because without us trying to fix us blokes, because we have been overly trained, the masculine response to any problem, fix. Sometimes we need one, because otherwise we're going to fall off the bloody edge, aren't we? What might you, or should we both do it rather than me go, because I'm doing this, I'm giving you all.
I don't know whether as a takeaway point, because now I'm thinking because we tend to summarize, like we tend to blame ourselves for reacting, as in reaction is wrong, when it's not. It's just a reaction. And it's a multifaceted causal plane, isn't it, of where's that reaction come from, and it all co-arises. So if I was to give listeners some sort of takeaway point, don't blame yourself, because it's not your fault. And I don't mean that from a victim perspective either, because I think we're in a world currently where victimhood can be weaponized into something else, which is another conversation that we could sit with in the future. But from a perspective of where is the reaction coming from? Is it coming from your own thoughts? Is it coming from your own emotions? If them thoughts and emotions are making your body react to a certain thing, then where are them thoughts coming from? Is it from the past? Is it from the day before? Is it from an argument that you had with your partner or a colleague at work? Everything's so interconnected that there isn't one cause. So if there's not one cause, then you can't blame yourself for that, because everything is co-arising at the same time. And that's just the internal world of that individual and the external world of the body. Then bring in the collective relational world and the interpersonal world, as in how many people do we relate to every single day, or how many things do we relate to, as in what's your relationship with your phone, what's your relationship with your car, what's your relationship with your spouse and your kids and your friends and the people that annoy you. All of them are co-arising at the same time of you reacting to the situation. And then you've got the good old society.
Yeah.
We are in a sick society. We're in a toxic society. We think that this society is a healthy society. And then we blame the individuals for reacting to the scenarios. But that's a healthy reaction to a toxic society.
So there's something there about not invalidating our reaction. So sometimes it needs a validation, unless we're doing something where like this reaction's not, because I might do some things that are reactively not helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not making you a cup of tea then, and I'll tip the tea. I'm like, don't do that. That's not helpful to the experience. So it's looking at when your reaction's going to take you one way or another, isn't it? And sometimes we can invalidate ourselves from a healthy perspective. Don't do that. That's not helpful. Actually, where there's blame, Brené Brown says there's shame. So if we're blaming and shaming, that going into the brain, what that does to it is awful, isn't it? So you've got them very practical things. So I'm reacting. What's going on? What's surrounding my thinking? Thoughts are generally mental events in the mind, and they can come as images. What's the emotional tone of my body? Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. If you can name the emotion, all the better. Name it to tame it. So you've got that option, and then you might react to being taught the reactivity skills, and you're like, I want it to, even trying to be responsive can be irritating sometimes. Then you're like, I just want to widen the window a little bit. Then you want to notice like what's going on in the environment, the interconnectedness, and then you're just good to go again. Someone cuts you up in traffic, and someone doesn't turn up on time. You're like, Jesus, I've ordered this thing from Amazon. It's got the blinking neighbours, and just to end as well, to give a shout out to someone, cousin Ben. So my cousin, seen me at an event recently, and he's just a lovely person. And he said, I listened to your podcast spontaneously. He said it was just lovely, but offered some real constructive help that was just super useful. He said, but where's you in all of this? And I was like, So for us as well in this process, I was like, he'd seen a reaction of how I normally am. And I can't be everything to everybody in every space. It'd be impossible. But just to acknowledge what he said, that really helped me in like my reactivity last time, how I was in this session. And you know, it might be that you need to kick my head in the next one. Be like, how are we then, mate? You can pick a topic, because I know I've picked this one. So I'm sitting in it. Anna is like, what do they call him? That grey-haired bloke who used to interview people in the 80s and 90s. He was massive. He was a Yorkshire bloke. I can't remember his name.
Oh, Parkinson.
Yeah, Parkinson. I'm sat here like Parkinson.
You know, for our listeners, this is our second episode of me and you working in this way. We've known each other for years, but in this type of way, this is a new thing.
God, it's novel, isn't it?
So we're finding the roles and the rules of this as we go along. And I suppose for listeners and viewers, because it's now going to be on YouTube, is they'll see us change over time, as you do in any process, or they'll hear us communicate differently. And if, you know, from your perspective at the minute, you're the curious interviewer, and I'm the receptive person who answers lots of questions.
So next time you can be the top.
But if we go with, I suppose we are quite intuitive.
Yeah.
We go with what we go with.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, "Oh, you do that next time," like two kids on the playground.
It's too clinical, wouldn't it? And boring, and we'd react
well, it's
to
just
that.
This is a conversation that is rich, multifaceted, goes all over the place, comes back to its original agenda of reactivity, and it should be like that. Yeah. Rather than trying to control the rules and the roles.
So, in a sentence or two, how would you summarise reactivity, responsiveness, getting back on track, taking the breath, and then, because it's relentless, isn't it? In the most wonderful way. How would you summarise that?
For listeners and viewers, is to firstly be kind to the reaction, because not all reactions are bad, not all reactions are unhealthy. Honour the reaction. And if you want to do it differently, reflect on the action and reaction. And then the more you develop a deeper relationship with your reactivity, then it becomes an ally rather than an enemy.
Well, so skillful response or reactivity.
And sometimes merging them.
Yeah, middle path.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like there's a TikToker and he goes, "Follow me, I'm delicious." He's an Irish bloke, in case you didn't guess. I feel like I need a catch.
That wasn't Irish.
Follow me, I'm delicious.
Sounds like some sort of New York gangster from the 40s.
We need a catchphrase. I feel
Do,
like,
don't we? Yeah.
yeah.
I think that will come with time, I think.
I bet the listeners can't wait.
Yeah. Or in the comments, let's see what people
Yeah.
say to what type of catchphrase.
Stay alert, stay present, keep reacting, keep being gorgeous and beautiful in everything you do.
That's too long. How are you going to remember that? It's not a slogan. Haven't we already got it though?
What about stay sassy? Can I do that?
Yeah, what's stay, isn't it?
Stay sassy.
So we could change the
Stay
word
sassy.
that follows stay can be anything that we want it to.
Stay sassy.
Yeah.
I can't click my fingers.
And on that note, we shall see you next time.